Greetings, everybody. I am General Griswold Grimm of the First LARP Ingression Protocol, and today I am having a Fringe Encounter with one Justin Wells from Justin's Morning Coffee on Twitter. He's known to me and mine through his appearance last year with Paul Vanderklay, where this was said.
Or contact me on the Discord or Twitter or my email, and I can ship things your way. And no, because that, in fact, especially for Sherry Harkin, she was the art person who came to me and said, I want to start an art group. And I said, all right, anybody want to be in an art group, man?
Anyway, he showed up last year and never got around to finding me, which was really confusing since he was supposedly working on a documentary about this little corner. But we're remedying that here today, ladies and gentlemen, in the Fringe Nexus Cafe. Justin, hello.
Hi.
It's known through the description on that video with you and Pastor Paul that you work in the entertainment industry, so it's mandatory for me to give everybody in my crowd the savings throws versus mind control. You can participate as well if you like. It's I roll these dice, and you choose which one you associate with, and then if it's over 10, you take half damage from the mind control that follows. You get to choose between survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Choose. Survivalists with a 10. Socialists with a nat 20 must be a friendly. Lovers of wisdom, Baker's Coven is a 13. Heart folks, only a 5. I hope you have your bonuses. Indigo Kids, that's the number of transformation. Welcome, Justin. Hello.
Hi.
So these are Fringe Encounters, which is once upon a time, I realized that the CIA was recording all of my video conversations anyway. So why not share them with my friends? And so when I first meet someone, I like to do it this way. We did touch base at the Chino Estuary Conference, though. So we're cheating a little.
Yeah. Cool. Good to see you.
Okay.
What should we talk about first?
Well, I'm sort of protective of my own, and I consider my own to be part of this little corner, and you are reportedly doing some sort of documentation of our species. Could you tell us what the aim and function and where you are in that project?
Well, this is what I said to Paul back then. I said, it's interesting. I just like everybody else, I sort of ran into these YouTube videos, started watching them. I wound up, when Paul announced the Estuary project, I noticed that John Van Donk was only an hour away from me, and so he had an in-person estuary in Chino there where you were. Mm-hmm. And so I started going. I just drove out there one night, just drove out to one of his estuary meetings, and he said, well, you should talk to Paul, and so I talked to Paul and said, yeah, I'm a documentary guy. I'm a Hollywood guy. I've worked in the movies my whole life, and I'm always thinking about documentation. I don't necessarily know if something is going to lead to something interesting or not. For example, I remember I did all of this filming one time of a guy that was doing a local campaign over here in Highland Park, not very far away from me. I filmed all of this footage. It was super interesting. I learned a lot. At the end of the whole process, he decided, I don't think I want to have a documentary made about me. And I said, fine. Even though I had people sign releases and stuff, and I filmed a bunch of stuff, never did release it, but it was an amazing experience for me, So I'm always thinking about just something about like the stream of time, and things are happening, and I always just like to think, okay, I want to snapshot this because it's going to be relevant later, like we're all doing and saying and thinking things right now that we think is totally normal, but with the process of time, we'll be able to reflect on it and get a larger perspective about who we are and why we do what we do and all that, So to me, like everything is always a potential for an interesting, some kind of documentation, it doesn't have to be film necessarily. It could be in written form or something like that. But it's just something that I've always been kind of like interested in, And so what I said to Paul was, this was my experience of the little corner of the internet, coming to it late, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a river and it's just flowing so fast. And there's all these little niches and people are like it's like you're dropping in the middle of a conversation. And it's like, you hear these terms and you hear these people referenced and you hear all this stuff and you're like, well, who was that? What does that term mean? And so what I said to Paul was, it would be really nice if there was something that just gave someone the introduction, like just the terms and who the players are, and just something that you could say, well, here, just watch this, and you'll kind of get a sense of what conversations we're having on this corner of the internet, right?
Yes.
So I had that idea, and I was already in Europe. I worked on a movie in Greece over the summer, and Paul and John Van Donk were going through Europe last September, and I said, well, why don't I just swing by this festival in Germany? And
yes, the German festival.
It was the Bridges of Meaning Festival in Germany.
It was Landau or something, wasn't it?
It was in Landau, Germany. Yeah.
Landau. Yeah.
And I said, well, I'll just workshop it. I'll just see if even the people there would want a little video that documents, some of this phenomenon. And what I found from there was, I thought, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the community would want that or not, And my thing is, if I can add some value in the world, then I'll take the time and do it. But I want to make sure that it is going to be valuable for people, So I filmed a little bit of some interviews and things at that festival. And then when John Van Donk was going to do the Chino Estuary here, or as Estuary Hub Festival, I guess you call it, here in LA County, he said, well, why don't you just do a 10-minute video sort of about the conference and what an estuary is that he can use for the estuary leaders if they want it. They could put that on their website, or they could send like, here's kind of like what an estuary is for someone who doesn't know what it is. Here's kind of a little bit of context just for the layperson, right? So I said that's doable. That's something that I could probably put together and see if people like it. And then if they do like it, if it is valuable, because it's a little bit different than what you guys do, I think, which is these long conversations on the internet that are unedited, right? When you're curating something, it takes a little bit more time to craft it and to kind of, but then if nobody watches it, then it's like, if it's just another one of the things on the internet that everybody just kind of like, it consumes, and then, here's another one, and then they consume that one, then it's not worth all that extra time. You might as well just do a video like we're doing now and talk about it and let everybody
but your initial point is that every little thing we do echoes through eternity. And while like people might not appreciate the effort and time you put into such a piece of work now, like when some documentarian comes along and wonders, what was this phenomenon that led to this weird thing? Like then your work will be there. But I had to, around the same time you appeared on Pastor Paul's channel the first time, Chad was already pitching in our corner of the corner, like, we need to be documenting this because clearly it's worth at least the hours and hours of time and attention of X number of people. And I would say X number is around 1,000. There's very, percentage wise, there's very few that participate visually on the streams and stuff. And there's larger, but still very small percentage that actively chats. And like a lot of people just listen at work, but there's still all this mental energy being directed to whatever's going on in this flotilla of channels. I like to think of it as, and so that people wouldn't. I don't know. Maybe it's just the fraternal regiment embodying narcissistic sociopathy types that know this should be documented. But well, I'm glad there's something. So, but you just made the two things, and you're not actually documenting the phenomenon of this little corner at this point.
Yeah, well, like I said to Paul, I think it would be nice for the community to have something that is a little bit of an introduction, you know. But what I noticed when I sort of pitched the idea in Germany there was that everybody has a different idea of what they think this little corner of the internet is, and that the question of who should define it is not necessarily super clear, you know. And so I wouldn't want to step on anybody's toes or anything. What I would want to do is just make a little, like I said, like a 10-minute thing about what an estuary is for John Van Donk that he can use for his estuary leadership network, and then see how that, if people like it, and then maybe if there's something a little bit longer that's interesting, you know, then I would be open to doing something like it. And what I like about documentary is you can just start collecting things and start kind of like gathering material as it happens, you know, or as you find it, and put it aside. And then you can kind of take a step back and look at it and say, you know, would this be interested if I packaged it up in a way in whatever format? And that's another question too, like, you know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, feature length, you know, of what might be interesting to put together at any time, you know. And right now there's a question of platforms and where's the best place to even watch a documentary anymore. That's an open question for me, you know. So all of these things are just questions that I have, and I don't necessarily want to commit to saying I'm doing something except for this little 10-minute piece that I will do for John Van Donk.
I see. I understand the. I keep asking for an accountability stalker to hold me to all the things I'll say I'll do, and you just avoid saying you'll do them. That's wise, but I must confess that I've caught you taking confession. So tell me about that part of this, not officially a project.
Yes. So now this is interesting because you have sort of coined paintball for Jesus as a like a ritual or a practice or something, or a tradition maybe, that you pitch that as maybe when these little in-person gatherings happen, that might be a nice ritual to, or tradition to instill. Would that be an accurate?
No. But since you're documenting things, I'll tell you the origin. In my official first appearance on Pastor Paul's channel, and my holy quest is the actual instantiation of what I call Paintball for Jesus, which is a league of competitive paintball where a church sponsors a team of 6 players, and the churches compete against each other the way that high school football teams do, because that. To me, the churches are in serious trouble, particularly with getting the youth and the young people in. Maybe not so with the mega churches, but the ones that actually aren't preaching prosperity gospel. And for me, my life was Rip Van Winkled by the video game industry because it was better for me there than here. And that is happening en masse and further shattering us into individualizations and tiny isolated fragments. And if you know anything about cults, you target the isolated people first, and they're doing that to everybody. Why? And so getting people off of the screens and especially young people into their bodies with weapons that might blind drone sensors as the drones come to hunt us down is just all good to me. And that it would help revivify the church just frankly, if I'm training soldiers in urban combat, I'd prefer they love Jesus. So there's paintball for Jesus, and that was my thing, and that I was trying to push it in the corner so hard. Was what was noticed and adopted and exapted into the rituals for. They did it at Thunder Bay first because Catherine is amazing. She invited me to actually. She was going to have me attend, but I couldn't cross the border for reasons, and but they did a paintball for Jesus there, and now since the Estuary Chino event was Thunder Bay Part 2, sort of, they also did it there. But now the people who attend these events and participate in the PB for J, that part of it, are enthused enough with what that's like to continue it for at least what, those of us who think that's part of this little corner events. Like, I don't think they're doing one in DC, but other events, I'm sure, will, like Kansas City coming up, I heard. I'm sure it'll be there. So, but that's PB for J.
Okay. So it's maybe not intentional by you, but it's becoming maybe a little tradition.
Yeah.
Person events, right? And that it means something, it's like once you do something once, it's kind of a fun thing, but then once you do it again and it starts to become a ritualized thing, maybe that's too strong of a word, or just a tradition.
No, it's perfect, because like the situation we start in is you're a dude on the internet watching YouTube videos, and then like for some reason you end up watching this little corner videos, and Pajot teaches you about symbolism, and Vervaeke teaches you about how the brain works, and that you need to have an ecology of practices, and what practices means is actually doing and then Paul like tries to just think with everybody along, like he's like the I call him homeroom. It's like he holds us together as a place to be and thinks in front of us, so we're all thinking in the same direction of he's like a maven, I think, in what you call it terms. But so that's all happening, but until the practices become practices, that's these meeting in person thing, this actual embodiment thing, that's what's beginning, or has started to begin, over the last year and a half. But for most of us, many of us are 4 or 5 years deep now. So
right. And I'm a relative newcomer.
yeah, you're very, very correct about the onboarding problem.
Mm-hmm.
And
so let me just, the reason why I asked you about that and how it relates to this little confession booth idea.
Right, the confession. Thank you for I'm not great at that part.
So this is what I said to John Van Donk. I said, so when we were in Germany, I set up a little interview space, and with my camera and a little ring light, and I was like locked in there the whole festival. I missed most of the talks because I said, okay, if you guys want, to tell me your story, we can do a little interview over here. And they'd say, okay. And they'd kind of trickle in. And I wound up, I said, well, I'm here to participate, not to work, So I thought, well, what if I just put a little recorder in a room, and I called it the confession booth, and you can just tell me your story. You can just go in there, press record, and tell me your story. And then now I'm documenting it, but I'm not going through this whole thing where you have to appear on camera and take time away from all of this connection, in-person connection that people are having at this conference. But you can just take 5 minutes and go in there, and then because what I'm looking for is maybe a common pattern or theme to the stories that people that wind up in this little place, physically in Chino in this case, or virtually in the little corner. What's the kind of common narrative there, and so it doesn't even have to be. You don't have to tell me who you are and give me permission to use your name. You could just anonymously, via audio only, just tell me how you got here and who you are, kind of a thing, whatever you want to say. And I just said, to John, I said, well, let's just do it. Let's just see if even people want to do that, And so we put a little recorder in the prayer room because the conference was in a church. So it was in the prayer room, a little recorder. And I just put confession booth on the outside because I thought that was kind of funny, here you can. And of course, in my little book on documentary film, I write in the field of theology and film. And I think that confessional documentaries is a genre of documentary. There's a certain kinds of truth, testimonial truth, confessional truth, lament truth, celebratory truth, and confession is one. And confessional truth is about being honest about who you are without the filters, without your masks or personas, like in a Jungian sense. And so I thought, yeah, I'll just call it confession booth, and I'll put this little audio recorder in there, and I'll just see what people say to me, And I didn't get a lot because I didn't push it too hard. I didn't want to try to, force people, hey, stop talking to all
go confess
and go in there and record this for me. But the people who did go in there, it was very touching, very, very. And so
would you say like there's a distinct difference since you used the mimetic of confession in the second set of the content you got as far as stories of event attendees?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a certain ritual of like what we're doing right now, which is sitting down and having a face-to-face, even though it's virtual conversation, and there's give and take. I'll say something, you'll say something, and it's like a tennis match falling back and forth. And there's so many of those already on the internet. And I noticed when I was doing these interviews in Germany, I said, well, we could have done this on Zoom. You're just telling me your story, and there's nothing unique about the fact that I'm sitting behind a camera and you're sitting in a chair and my camera's pointed at you like you would in a documentary interview. There's nothing unique about it except for the way it's lit or something like that, So I thought, well, if I'm going to do something valuable that for people, then maybe it's got to be a little bit different than like what we're doing right now. I'm certainly happy to contribute to what we're doing right now. I do enjoy good conversations and longer conversations, and whether they're in person or on the internet, I'm all about that. That's why I'm here, But I thought, yeah, well, maybe.
Buddy, if we get where we're going, this isn't going to be a conversation. This is going to be a sweet dialogos.
Okay.
But to get you to relax to that point may take another 20 minutes. So it's all right.
So anyway, it was just a little experiment. It could become a tradition at other events if like your paintball, maybe if people want that, I don't know, but we'll see when I finish this little video for John Van Donk. If people like that aspect of it, then maybe it would be something that we could repeat. Yeah, I don't know.
So with regard to making documentaries, I over on the Broken Clock Tower Discord, which we represent with the image, I began with here, where the Broken Clock Tower Discord is represented by the building on the right. The one down here, this is the Fringe Nexus Cafe that we're in now.
Okay.
And so that's the mental representation. It's technically a Discord. You know what that is? You're familiar?
Kind of, yes.
It's like a Telegram group, kind of.
Yeah.
But it lives up to its name. It causes a great deal of discord. It's like when you first discover it, it's really neat, and then you realize it's like MySpace, where everybody has one and tries to get you to come to theirs. But it's sorting itself out. Over there, I have a chamber, a special section called the Resonance Hall, which is to maintain interior integrity within the community on the Discord. And in that place, there's a social memory complex. And that's kind of how we handle our onboarding is we have the little clips of the special moments, like that time Pastor Paul said this.
God loves me because he sent me GrimGriz. I know he loves me.
Or that time Jordan Peterson said this.
They don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable. And so
those little moments, I think, are the way that like introduce who's who to the people, the newcomers. That's the one of the ways we're addressing the documentation and onboarding problem. Or yeah. As a person who teaches people how to document stuff, what kind of things other than the ones that all touch us and make us laugh, like, so to me the notion is like whatever shares, like, evokes enough emotion in the person, like, oh, like they do on their favorite show, essentially, like the way John like smiled at Pajot in that one, or those little moments that we record that evoke emotion are great to capture. What else should we be throwing in the vat to keep people on board?
Well, let me just say a little bit, how I got interested in documentary.
Okay.
I started attending the Sundance Film Festival every year. And I think I started in maybe 04 or 05. And I was involved with this organization called the Windwriter Forum, which is dialogues between people of faith and filmmakers at the Sundance. And so every year we would go on this pilgrimage to Park City, Utah, and watch a bunch of films, and then invite the filmmakers to participate in these dialogues. And for them, it was just part of the press junket, another group that wanted to interview them about their film. So they were happy to do it. But then the conversations were not so much like a typical conversation you get at Sundance, which is like, how did you finance it? And, what was it like working with so-and-so's celebrity or something like that, but more the deeper parts of the artistic, philosophical parts of the work. And so over the years, I noticed that documentary seemed to have the kind of a ritualistic quality. I mentioned the confession aspect, the sense of when a subject would be at the premiere and they would say that this film was like therapy. And I thought, well, it's public, it's totally the opposite of what you do in therapy, which has the client doctor confidentiality. How can that be therapeutic? And what I came to kind of believe was that people just need to process, and they need a listener to process through their life. And even when it's a person who comes and says, I want to hear your story and I'm going to put it out in public, that's enough to trigger this confessional, I don't know what you'd say, like need or something like that. And so they wound up more healthy after the film was over. Like famously, people in early on in documentary history, a documentary done by John Huston about war veterans after World War II had a higher discharge rate from the mental hospital of the people who were documented than the ones who were not. So there was a sense of just being a listener. So I adopted this theory of the documentary should be something that makes the person more well off in some way. Like they should be better off for having gone through the experience. So it's kind of a therapeutic process. Therapeutic, I don't know if that's the right word, but something like that for the filmmaker and also the subject, And so that's kind of the theory that I developed. And just because I saw it every single year at Sundance with filmmaker after filmmaker and subject after subject. And I noticed the difference between exploitative documentary filmmaking and maybe you could say generative documentary filmmaking, And so that's what I teach. I teach as an adjunct at a college down the street here, a little intro to documentary class. And it's for me, it's just kind of a fun experimental thing of like, what can I say to these students and see what they make, And I've been kind of honing it now over the past few years of how to get just an ordinary film student who's not usually interested in documentary. They kind of came to film school for Steven Spielberg or Terrence Malick or something. And now here I am, they're stuck in my documentary class because they're required to take it, and what can I get them to make, And I've been blown away with what they've made using this process of, let's say, generative, respecting your subjects, being genuinely curious about your subjects, and having a question that you approach that you actually have, not what you think people want to see or something like that, but something that is genuinely interesting to you. And if it's interesting to you and you can figure out why, then it'll be interesting to somebody else, and so that's kind of how I teach it.
Well, then as such, I have a question.
Mhm.
That night that you ended up driving to John Van Donk's estuary, when did you make the decision, and was there anything weird about it?
When did I make the decision to drive to?
Yeah, like when you like this estuary thing, I'm gonna go check it out. When was that decision, and was there anything suspicious about it coming into your mind at the time?
Interesting. I think I decided to do it because I'm definitely somebody who there's been certain moments, certain times in my life where I've felt the most fulfilled was when I was a part of a community that had a shared, I don't want to say a shared metaphysic, but a shared narrative, like a shared set of topics to talk about, and the most obvious example of that would be on college campuses. When at the various times I've been on college campuses and we're all taking the same class. And then when you go to a cafe and you're all sitting there talking about this thing that's interesting to all of us, there's a certain synergy or something. And then
you're all pilgrims on the college road together, right?
Exactly. But I mean, even there was a time like I got really bored when I first started in the film business. I was working for Panavision. That was where I got my start, and it was out in the Valley, and I was alone. Nobody in my family's in the film business. Nobody from undergraduate at the time went with me. I was like the first one to get a job from my little major in Orange County and went up to LA. And I started going to UCLA Extension at night and taking philosophy classes because I just needed something. I just was like, I need more than just this sort of business. I was working for a corporation, and trying to get into the film business, but it was, I was at the bottom of the totem pole, and I just, I had a long road ahead of me of hardship, and so my little respite was I would drive down to UCLA and take an existentialism class or I took a Jungian class. It was like a mythology class, I guess you'd say, philosophy of religion, Sartre, Kierkegaard, and it was a set of like all of the same like retired guys, like a retired English teacher, a retired somebody, and a couple of younger guys like myself that were perennially taking these classes. And then we'd go afterwards to the little cafe on campus at UCLA, and it was just a great experience. I was experiencing like mentorship from these retired guys, and I was experiencing also someone to process through something on a higher intellectual level than, my coworkers or something like that, and so I've experienced those moments very rarely in life, you might say, but I could see how healthy they were, and so, I was watching Paul on YouTube, and then I heard, oh, he's starting the estuary thing, and oh, there's one close to me. It was natural. Well, why don't I just go check it out?
So right when you heard about it, you were like, it might be one of those things I like.
Well, it not right when I heard about it, because I think I was working at the time, and I work long hours on these movies, as I would just work as a camera guy is my day job. And so it was after that project was over, I said, oh yeah, I forgot, I sort of forgot about that estuary thing, but here it is. It's on Meetup. I Googled it or something like that, and I found it, and I drove out there. And then John Van Donk said, oh, it's great that you came. Let's have lunch, and we met up, and he drove out here to South Pass and had lunch. And then I kind of said, yeah, I think, I can. And then he was the one who said, you should talk to Paul. Right. And so then I wound up on Paul's channel, and everybody said, oh, you're a documentarian. You're going to make a documentary. And I was like, wait a minute. Did I say that?
Well, his title was like wanted, people interested, so it sounded, yes.
Well, what came out of that? What came out of that was a few like maybe a month or two of me doing the people who contacted me were also fellow sort of artists, I guess you'd say, or related to film. And so for like maybe 2 months or something before I went on to my next movie, my next job, we met over Zoom and did a little. I kind of had my own little estuary for a little while, and there's a few of the people that I saw at Chino that were a part of that group, but I wound up not continuing it because of my work schedule. So it did work. I mean, I made connections and and then I wound up in Germany, and then I wound up in Chino, and then I met you. And
so they hooked you in.
Yes. Yeah.
The hook is there. What you said earlier that no. Before we go on to that, with regard to what your students make, you say you've been impressed. What overall would you say that? Are there any themes to what that generation is speaking to when they're making the things that we need to know about as humans?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, the other thing that I think, my other theory about storytelling, I borrow from Paul Schrader, who wrote Transcendental Style, and he was a screenwriter for Martin Scorsese for a long time. And the way that he runs his writing classes is he believes in the oral tradition, which is that the more times you tell a story, the better you're going to refine it, and the better you're going to distill it down to its essence. And it's something to do with like getting it out of your head and then into a form that is beneficial for other people, is by the act of telling it. And you'll notice people that are good storytellers, they'll tell the same story and they'll just keep getting better and better and better.
Or the story will, at least.
Yes, exactly, the story. So I have built into my little class, I force them to tell it multiple times in multiple formats, So the first time they have to do it is they have to do an office hours meeting over Zoom with me after the first class to pitch their idea. And that's mostly just so I know that they're not going to do something crazy. I can kind of point them in this direction or that direction so that they're not doing anything dangerous or whatever, But really what it's there for is that they have to tell me what they're thinking. This is my idea. And then I'll push them on it, and I'll kind of get them to, okay, so now you should be able to tell that to your crew who's going to be helping you. And, in the future, it would be perhaps a financier or something like, oh, here's what I'm making, whatever, And then the next class, they pitch it to their classmates, so they have a little Google Slides or something like that. And they do a little 5-minute presentation of here's what my documentary is going to be. And I tell them, you have to tell them better than you told me the first time and get them excited about it. And I can see 1-2 times it's already gotten better and they haven't even done anything yet. And I think the reason I do it that way is because it just saves a lot of time. They don't go out and shoot a bunch of stuff that isn't going to be relevant to their project because they're refining it in their head,
Right. But like, have you noticed any, like, boy, they sure, like, they seem to be making stories about blank a lot these days. Right. Or like what is the generation feeling?
Well, they go surprisingly deep with the documentaries if you know how to help them go there, I think. So for instance, there was a girl that did one on body image recently, and it was actually really, really good. She just did a silhouette, and she had all these people come in, and it's just a silhouette of them, and then they just talked about what they hated about their bodies. And you could see that there's, this is a man, this is a woman, this is a larger person, this is a smaller person, this is a skinny person, whatever, and then it just kind of like went through all of these different people that all seem to have some problem with some part of their body, to the point where you just thought, well, it's totally random what they don't like about their bodies. It was really interesting. And then she kind of wrapped it up nicely with kind of an artistic B-roll ending of, film student-y kind of footage at the beach or something like that, black and white, but I could tell like it really had an impact on the other students. So body image is definitely, that's a theme, you know, which I'm not surprised because of Instagram, you know, and the whole.
That's why I have them roll saving throws or choose saving throws, because these are weaponized to make you feel like you're not okay without their product. Like we have to be very advertiser friendly, or we starve. So that's a natural result of like the Instagram filter. Oh yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But I think that if you give people a camera, a lot of times the story that comes out is either going to be what hurts the most or what they have the most hope for. And so that's the nature of my curiosity. Somebody with the access to young minds that I don't has.
Well, yeah, that's so body image. This last semester I had a couple different documentaries on body image, and then also technology, anti-technology, you might say.
Right?
You know, there was
moves.
Well, you know, there was one about the dopamine. How do you say it? Dopaminergic system, and cell phones. You know, and basically they interviewed a professor that talked about how all that works, and you know, sort of how the phone disconnects you from in-person interaction, and you know, just kind of a simple, but it was actually a pretty I was almost kind of telling him it's maybe a little too heavy-handed here of anti-cell phone, you know.
Yes.
You know,
I saw this great video on this thing that said stop using cell phones.
right.
I like when I see people on their cell phone, I like to imagine them with their eyes up in their head, like accessing their Neuralink, because
Right.
I don't know. It's
Right.
a fun visualization for me, I suppose.
Right. And then, you know, here's another one, isolation and loneliness. That's another theme. There was a kid that did a brilliant piece. There was one of his classmates, because now, you know, these college students were in high school during COVID, you know, and so that's a very formative time of their lives, you know. So there was this kid that at the age of 14, 15, 16 felt so isolated, he started recording a YouTube channel of him doing nothing, like him eating, you know, making peanut butter and jelly and not saying, never says anything on his YouTube channel. And it's just hours of him walking through the woods, or just in his car, or just at home, or whatever, just doing nothing. And this is his kind of way of kind of like artistically documenting his life, you know, and dealing with maybe some loneliness or isolation. So his roommate says, well, okay, I'm going to make a documentary about you and what happened to you, you know? And so he does this very, very poetic piece of all of these moments of this kid, and you watch him age and grow older, of being alone, you know? And I was like, wow, like that's a picture of this generation, you know, this isolatedness, this aloneness, this you know, not only is it the screen thing, you know, but also you can't go socialize at all because of the pandemic, you know, and that's during those super formative years of their.
Well, it happened to the 5 and 6 year olds too. We just don't get to see the movies about it for another 10 years.
Right. I'm gonna turn down my camera a little bit here. Just getting brighter outside. Yeah. So anyway, those are some of the themes I see.
So you did say everybody has their own notion of what this little corner is, and now that you've admitted to being hooked into it, explain it to a stranger for me.
Oh,
if you can.
well, that's what I was going to ask you, because you've been around it more often. I can.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil yours, though. Give it. You know what I mean? I'll taint your version.
Well, I can only tell you what happened to me, which was, you know, bouncing around on the internet in 2020, which was or 2021, somewhere in there, where there was no work going on, no movies going on. So I, like everybody else, was at home, and And, you know, the only thing that I would do is I would go downstairs. There was a little restaurant that was still open, and I would just sit and read a book at one of the tables there. And that's the only social interaction I had during that time, was other people sitting across at another table, you know. And I ran into Paul, and I remember Paul mention Jonathan Peugeot, but again, it was like this passing thing, like, oh, a lot of people don't understand Peugeot because they think he's weird or something. And I went, wait, who? And I'm like rewinding it and like trying to figure out who it was. I didn't know how to spell it or whatever. And then finally I found Jonathan Peugeot's channel. And again, like, I'm a late comer to all this. This was probably 2021. And so then I would run to the water tower and back, which is about a mile away from here, once a day. And so I would just listen to one of his videos every time I ran to the water tower and back. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, I discovered Matthew Peugeot's book on the language of creation. And I just thought, oh my God, like, this is so groundbreaking to me in terms of what I've been trying to figure out for years, which is the nature of narrative and story and art. And also the Bible, because, you know, I studied theology for a little while, philosophy and theology. And I thought this approach is like so helpful to me, not only to tell my own stories, let's say, but also to understand the stories of the world and to understand how cultural phenomenons happen, you know, and to put it like a perspective on it that makes it so that it's less likely for you to just click into the party line of whatever happens next, you know, like less likely for you to turn into a parrot, you know, like there's a game that people would play at this little restaurant that I would go down, and the game was, I'm going to say something about what the politics are of right now based on, let's say, NPR or MSNBC. And you're going to either take the other side, you're going to be Fox, and I'm going to be in, you know, and now we're going to play a game, right? And so so first I put out a test and I say, okay, here's the talking point, and you're going to either identify yourself as an ally or an enemy, okay? And then we'll square off. And if we're allies, that means we're just going to dish on the other side together. And if we're enemies, that means we're going to fight, right? And that's the game, you know. And I just thought, well, that's a terrible game, you know, that doesn't help anything, you know. And so so I think Matthew and Jonathan, sort of like coming from this outside perspective of being in the woods and being in the Middle Ages or something like that, was able to, for me, kind of like shed light on the game in a way, and make me realize that you don't have to play that game. If it's a maladaptive game, you don't have to play it. You can play a different game, you know. And so how do you do that? You know, how do you play a different game? Like when you run into somebody and they put the chessboard out and they make the first move, how can you like basically say, I'm not playing that game, and play something else, you know? And symbolism and narrative and art is a perfect game to play that's way better, you know? I'm not going to parrot the talking point back to you. I'll switch the subject to something that is more, that's underneath all of that. You know, like if they say like politics is downstream from culture, I tweeted at Matthew Peugeot and said, what's upstream of culture? And he said, wizards and what did he say? Wizards and gurus, I think, maybe.
I have a big affection for that man. I've just based on his tweets.
Yeah. So anyway, I think what it is if the game that's downstream of culture that everyone is playing right now is maladaptive, go upstream, you know, like go to the archetypes, go to the universal stories. Don't
become wizards.
Yeah.
So riding along with us down that road now, or?
Yeah. So what I've noticed with the more I meet everyone like yourself in the little corner, I noticed that they will kind of be attached themselves to the game of one of the big patron saints, Paul, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Majot, Vanderklay, and they'll sort of, it's so, again, like, I think it's like a game, it's like so Vanderklay plays a certain game, right? So he'll set it, he is, wants to know your story, and he wants to connect with you, and he wants to find what you can do and help you connect with other people. He's got that pastoral kind of influence, right? Followers of Vervaeke are playing maybe a slightly different game, where it's this academic speak, wanting to know the answers to cognitive science and life and meaning and meditation and spirituality through these mechanisms that he uses. And for Peugeot, that's more, I'm in the Peugeot camp in that sense. I'm more of someone who wants to know about archetypes and narrative symbols, creativity. That's kind of the realm that I operate in, I suppose. And so people that are also in that vein, the kind of artist types that I meet in this little corner of the internet, I really connect with. The Vervaeke types, I can almost get there, but I'm not quite smart enough to, I'm just not good at math. I'm not good at remembering all of the definitions to all of these different terms, but I'm close. I feel like I'm close, but I'm not. Sometimes those conversations go over my head.
We're helping those people talk to other people too. I mean, that's part of teaching those people how to talk to other humans is part of what the work that happens here.
Yeah.
So my corner story is long. If you really want it, most of it's in the Harley Sealbinder podcast. So I'll just tell you what happened.
Okay.
What happened is once upon a time, Jordan Peterson made a bunch of video lectures of what he taught people that were going to be paid shrinks one day. And when he decided he wasn't going to let people put pronouns in his mouth, he got a whole lot of attention. And when they looked into him, like the people who gave him that attention found those maps of meaning lectures and what those were. And essentially what he did with the Bible lectures is tell all the children from broken homes what their dad would have told them if they hadn't come from broken homes. And,
they don't get encouragement. And people need so little encouragement. It's just unbelievable.
And then, so like the big rich people said, "Hey, dude, we're taking you on a book tour." Blah. And eventually he ran out of content. And when he did, the YouTube algorithm fed all those people stuff like Vervaeke, Pajot, and Pastor Paul. And then he went absent when they put him in a Russian coma. And so there was this giant hole of content production. And all those people were fed and held together by us. That was the formation of I don't think if he hadn't dropped off, I don't know that the corner would have formed. And then we started recognizing each other in the comment sections and the Hive Mind chats, and there was the Discord. And so when we started recognizing each other, and so that's where like a Fringe Encounter would be like, we just got done watching Pastor Paul, we go sit and have a cup of coffee, except we don't have places to do that unless we also do it from behind the camera. And that just the way you saw Vervaeke's lecture on the home and the home base and the home range, because we're splitting our attention, like it used to be, you had your work life and your home life. And now it's your work life and your home life and your internet life and your spiritual life. And so we're separated in all these places. But in our digital lives, this is the place, this is our digital village. And we go on quests and bring things back to the village, and it's become something. And like, I wouldn't be opposed to a hostile party coming in and doing a review and making it like a Vice hit piece on how culty this place is, just because we need the opponent processing sometimes. But, and opposition builds strength and whatnot. But that's what this is. It's people. It's a digital flotilla of channels of human attention that continually go into the same place until it becomes placey, and now it's villagey, and it's reaching down and manifesting into like physical events, and ideally we'll build a city in Wyoming at some point. But right now it's just, we're on the journey, because I'm sure many of us would like love it if we could just live it, like, instead of being in the apartments we're in, being in one apartment building together. And so I don't know, there's lots of angles, because we're, as humans now, we have so many different worlds to live in, and where they van and cross over, and the relationships being like only one in one place is weird. We're trying to like add depth of connection and dimension to those relationships. But yeah, to me, that's what it is. It's a digital. It's a flotilla of channels, so it's like a digital village on the water, on the information ocean. But that keeps surfacing. Each new piece of content is the part of the boat that's above the water that day, I guess. That does it for you.
So how does the emergence of this little corner of the internet relate to the Estuary Project? In terms, do you think that the Estuary Project is like an incarnation of the virtual, community or something, or what's the relationship for you?
For me, the motive of the estuary is to mix the living water of the believers with the salty water of the non-believers. And like, as that project was announced, as like, to me, that's Pastor Paul's paintball for Jesus. It's like what he's pushing, the way I'm pushing PB for J in the corner. But that's essentially a lot of what's happening as far as the discussions in the corners, especially the ones like in the Discord voice rooms, and that now they do on the stream sometimes. That's the work, is the mingling of those waters and the reestablishing of connection between the two, as people are dropped, like they hit the bottom of the materialist worldview and realize there's something more. And so this is, I don't know. And online, I try to bring the salt. Like I can't get these guys to talk about Alan Watts, or Shiva, and so some people have to try and bring the salt in, and that's kind of my role. So yeah, the Estuary Project is a manifestation of what goes on here, but it's just like a surfacing. It's the real world surfacing of this digital Leviathan, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing that I noticed, which I'm more convinced of now after Germany and Chino, is that the bigger it gets, the more likely it is that anywhere in the world that you go, you'll be able to find a like-minded person in that sense, in the sense of having these sorts of conversations, because there'll be an estuary group there, which I think is because, part of the problem with the isolation that people feel, I think, which causes them to go into ideologies, I think, in some ways.
Makes them vulnerable to ideologies.
Exactly.
Because if I believe what those people believe, they'll let me hang out with them.
It's a pseudo community. Yes, exactly. It's a fashionable belief that you can wear that can be a ticket into to some feeling of community. Well, part of the reason is because everyone moves around so much. Like none of my relatives of my immediate family live in California anymore. I'm the only one left. But when I was a kid, all of my cousins, both sides of my grandparents, aunts and uncles, everything. Like it was all in the same town, you know, and for probably thousands of years, that's, you know, how humans lived. It was never this fluid, you know, this.
So you grew up with what the new kids lost. Yeah,
exactly.
nobody gets that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, maybe some, but not many get that anymore. And that, like, on the highest surface level, like they'll tell you the gross domestic product of a country, but the honest product of a country is its people.
Mm-hmm.
The honest and we're not growing ours healthy anymore.
Right. Oh. Well, so that goes to my little theory of what a community needs in terms of you need a voice of wisdom, a patriarch or matriarchal figure, you know, which is what kind of like Paul, you know, maybe in some of the other figures, you know, a voice of like someone you trust, you know, that's a little higher than you, maybe like a little more wizened to the world. You know, I mean, that's one of the appeals of Paul is that even though he is religious, he's open to all of these different ideas, and so many somebody that's employed that's very rare for someone that's employed as a pastor, because they're always worried about saying the wrong thing that's going to get them in trouble with their tradition or their denomination or something like that. And Paul's not about that at all. He's willing to talk about any subject, you know, and that's what I noticed. Like, for example, when I was in grad school, was every professor, they were not functioning as sources of wisdom. They were functioning as experts on this one little tiny thing that I got my PhD in, you know, epistemology in analytic philosophy. And I'm not going to tell you about anything else. So I noticed that all of the students that I was with a lot of undergraduates when I was in grad school, were on their own in terms of putting it all together and all this fragmentary expertise, and then no way to put it all together. And that's one of the things that I think why probably, for example, Peterson was known around campus when he was at University of Toronto or earlier as the one professor that you can go to that's going to change your life, because he's integrating everything together, you know? And so Paul, that was the same thing that Paul was doing, you know? And so that's one thing. You need a patriarch and a matriarch figure. You're like some kind of a wisdom person that helps you know how to process all of that stuff that you haven't processed yet.
Yeah.
And then, like in the Chino conference, John Vervaeke was talking about the axis mundi, like a fixed point in space around which the community can self-organize, and a shared narrative or mythology, even to the level of like everyone watches Seinfeld on Thursday nights. Even that is like better than what we have now, where everything is privatized, like everything is individual. So like the things that like hold you together in terms of wisdom, space, and then a story to live inside are all under attack, you might say, or all fragmented, you know, in some way. And so maybe, you know, maybe the Estuary project and this little corner project is putting some of those back together. Like Estuary is somewhat related to space, you know, and so maybe it's understanding that we've lost the axis mundi, you know. And then this little corner is somewhat related to wisdom, you know, and you know that you need these figures to help you understand, you know, someone who I can go to, like, what do I think about this thing that just happened? Well, I'll go see what Paul thought about it, and then I can process it. Like if he processes it this way, then I trust him, so I can kind of, you know.
And if not, Grim is going to tell him where he's wrong more often than not. So. Right. I do the after homeroom thing sometimes, but all right, man. This was a great Fringe Encounter. I don't go much longer than this.
Cool.
I'm going to play a clip, and it's going to ask you if you have anything you want to say in conclusion, and then you'll be full screen for your closing message. Are you ready?
Okay.
Do you have anything you want to say in conclusion?
Okay, in conclusion, all right. So if you guys think that the process of documentation, again, I don't know where this will go, but I just have an instinct for some reason that there's something going on with this little corner that's worth documenting. Just find me on Twitter. And if anything that you find that you think is worth noteworthy, about either your journey or the essence of this little corner, send me a message on Twitter, and it'll help me tap into the hive mind of distributed cognition.
Boy, howdy, hive mind. Okay, thanks, Justin. That's at Justin's Morning Coffee on Twitter, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Catch you around.
Okay. Thanks, Grim.
And then end recording.